People imagine that building software is like building a house. A house has an architect, and the architect makes a blueprint, and then people lay brick, and the house is done. Or building software is not like building a house because, one, it's usually never done. If you're a non-technical founder, don't sleep on this domain of being able to articulate clearly and coherently the product requirements, whether that's you or someone who's experienced in doing that. That's where the breakdown occurs most often.
Hi, listeners. Welcome to It's the People, our interview series where we explore the inside story of building companies and investment portfolios with high-octane founders, limited partners, and fund managers. We hope these conversations push you to be even better at what you do. I'm Wills Hapworth, and on this episode, my partner Andy and I got to interview Charlie Lambropoulos, who is a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of ScrumLaunch, a development agency for software engineers. Prior to launching ScrumLaunch, Charlie built and sold a mobile advertising company called Life Mobile. In our interview, we discussed a range of topics, including how youth sports taught him the value of incremental effort and taking a long view, how building software is more like raising a child than it is building a house, the impressive story of how his team rallied to make great things happen when the war in Ukraine first started, his advice and wisdom for non-technical co-founders and founders, and much, much more. To start things off, Charlie begins the conversation with his life story in 60 seconds.
Before we begin, we'd like to note that this interview is for informational purposes only, and that the opinions expressed should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.
Let me start by saying we're really excited about this. Thank you for being willing to be a subject on our podcast. So what I'll ask you to do, and hopefully you can do it in 60 seconds, the 60-second pitch, is tell your life story, going back to the beginning.
You know, I was prepared for like a lot of businessy questions. What question? Okay, the Charlie life story, the important parts. So, okay, I'm the same age as Will, so I'm 38. I was born in Chicago, and that's where I grew up. I have a younger brother, a younger sister, who are my kind of similarly aged siblings, a half-sister who's 14 or 16, maybe, different story, and two older stepsisters. So kind of a convoluted story. So I grew up in Chicago, mostly with my mom and my stepdad, and I played a lot of soccer growing up. That was kind of my main core activity. Went to Colgate with Wills, played soccer there, and then didn't really know what to do after that. But since I went to Colgate, I assumed at that time that everyone worked as an investment banker, a teacher, or a police officer. And I figured, I guess I'll be an investment banker, sort of. But I didn't have any internships. So I worked at Barclays in New York for a year in the back office and was like driving to New Jersey, like losing my mind. Anyway, a kid from my Colgate soccer team was at a startup in LA. So I drove to LA after a year at Barclays, worked there for almost 2 years. And I was lucky because the ad tech industry was changing. Then worked at another ad tech company, accidentally started a company from there, and became an accidental entrepreneur. And here we are. So for the past 15 years, I've been, I suppose, an entrepreneur, done a variety of businesses. And I wish I could say that it was deliberate from the beginning, but I kind of caught the bug by doing it.
And I love it. And just for the benefit of our listeners, because I'm guessing we'll talk about the business stuff a bit later, the most recent chapter of business activity, which you didn't touch on, is ScrumLaunch. And what is ScrumLaunch?
ScrumLaunch is a software development company, and we provide engineering, design, basically full tech teams for startups, starting mostly with early stage startups to help them grow and build good products.
Awesome. Are there any key memories, moments, learnings that jump out at you that shine the brightest from that whole 60-second life story? Maybe going back like really early that just stand out. Maybe they kind of define who you are, how you live, or how you make decisions today.
Yes. So I think there's a few things, but I'll go back. I think youth soccer had one of the biggest impacts on me. And we were just talking about this a little while ago about coaches. So there's two parts to this, I think. So in youth soccer, it's really interesting because if you play with the same kids from when you're 10 to when you're 18, Like the best kids at 10 aren't always the best kids at 18. And you don't realize ever in the moment how much your incremental effort, like how you should just keep going forward, because what you see tomorrow isn't a year from now or isn't 8 years from now. And so I think the thing that I realized looking back from that is regardless of the ups and downs, like if you just keep trying at something, you kind of have to try your best to keep the long view, because it's really easy, especially with startups, to get caught up with like, wow, I'm a loser. Maybe that's a little harsh for some people, but I guess if you're a founder, you probably understand. And you can just kind of get demoralized. And so you sort of have to put blinders on and realize like, okay, maybe I'm not the best today, but like, can I be better tomorrow or 5 years from now? And it's hard to put the long view in perspective. And the second one is to what we were talking about, with lots of different kinds of coaches. I realized there's certain types of coaches that work better for me, and resonate. Like I had the type of person who screams at you, people who are motivators, people who don't say much. And I think from all of them, it's valuable to try to be conscious of like, what can I learn from this method? Because then when you become a manager, you realize that just because, like, I like when people are rational and slightly positive, criticizing me isn't very effective. But then I have people I work with where I've learned, okay, if I try to be too democratic and just like listen to their ideas, like eventually maybe I'll think your idea actually sucks, but I'm being too polite to say it. So like, how can I sort of take lessons from these different like coaching styles? So anyway, to encapsulate all of that, I think youth soccer, those two lessons were pretty impactful, but I may not have realized them until I was a lot older, looking back.
I'm curious, thinking about sports, you've hired, I'm guessing, hundreds of people by now.
That's
Do you, we won't get into how many you fired. Is there anything you notice, see, observe, or take away when it comes to athletes, hiring ex-athletes?
That's a great question. I think the conventional wisdom is that they've been on a team, they're motivated, and they'll be like, proactive, or like they'll take a task and complete it. I can't say that, like, if I'm being totally candid, that I've noticed anything particular about athletes versus non-athletes one way or another. I think it's like a popular piece of conventional wisdom, and maybe it's true. I don't have a ton of evidence to say that it's not, but I've not found that there's something like particular about athletes versus non-athletes, but it does seem like there's general personality types I found that the hardest thing to find is people who are proactive. The personality type of proactive, get something done before being asked. And I'm not sure if athlete versus non-athlete is the dividing line for that one.
And if you had one question to sniff that out while you're interviewing, any tool you've used over the years that is a good barometer of that?
That's for me, that's a really hard question, and I wish I had a better answer. I find that doing small types of like tasks or projects are like the most realistic way, and asking someone for something kind of vaguely and then seeing if they ask follow-up questions or they deliver. I think it's pretty imperfect because they might make assumptions about, the parameters or whatnot. But people who ask clarifying questions and then you see them deliver something like that's, well thought out and thorough, I think that's been a good indicator. So kind of practical examples have been most effective. But if someone has a universal solution for that one, please let me know.
That proactive concept's really interesting because, I can say that I've definitely observed the same thing where you made me think. We're talking about soccer. I'm guessing you have seen that David Beckham series.
Yeah.
a lot of kids just did the drills and went home and that was it. Like he was obsessed, proactively getting better in the backyard. It's an interesting concept. One other thing that jumped out at me, the notion of like feeling like a loser. I heard somebody talk about how like if you're at the top of your game, you probably always feel like a loser, not a winner. Like if you're, Nadal, it's like there's always stuff you could be doing that's better. It never looks good to you.
It's an incredible point. I struggle with this so much. And like, fortunately, I have a supportive, positive wife because I'm like, maybe 30% of the time, like, wow, what am I doing? We're doing so bad. Like, we could be doing so much better. This product, like, I'm running a company and I'll look at like one of our clients' products and I'll see like, a color I don't like, and I'll be like freaking out about it for 6 hours. That's probably not healthy, but to your point, it's like hard to turn that off. I think it's important to consciously try to see the positive. And back to your point about like the David Beckham documentary, I guess most American soccer fans probably agree with me, but here's an interesting part of that. So in the US, when kids play youth soccer, it's mostly organized. And so you go to practice, you have a coach, like US system is like, let's play a 4-3-3. That's a specific style. And so there's really specific instructions. Do this. Like if you're here, do this. And so we end up with a country of not very creative players. But then you look at a country like South America, or like a continent like South America, and you have all of these kids who played outside, and there's more of a culture of kind of figure it out yourself. And so something I wonder is just generally with the way that kind of like our culture approaches like doing things, whether it's in school, there's like concrete parameters, you get an A or you don't. Sports, here's the rules. And then you look at the US and we look at founders, and there's more immigrant founders than not, I think. It's a good question of like, where does that proactiveness come from? Like, is that an innate personal attribute, or is it like a cultural thing? And then lastly, is that something that happens in childhood, or can you turn someone into that archetype of employee? And I'm kind of cynical that you can do that, but all are interesting things or at least I think about.
So you said that there's no thread that you can weave through the things that you've done. If we were to force you to try to figure out, is there a thing that led you to leave Barclays, led you to drive to the West Coast, made you think, hey, there's something interesting happening in advertising technology? Like, there's got to be some thread.
So I think there's no pattern of athletes versus non-athletes in terms of like what like type of employee there. But in terms of what I've done, I think the common thread that I've I think is most honest is I'm really curious, and everything that I've done is something I've gotten curious about. And I've also come to believe that like if you're smart enough person and you're motivated, you can learn a ton of new things. And the best way to learn something is by doing it. And so I think Barclays, first of all, was just super boring. So all of the things I've done, I've had to be interested in, because I think most founders who launch a company and are selling their product, probably the reason they're often the best salesperson is because they're selling with conviction. And so for me, like first I started the ad tech company. That was a domain I knew. And I was kind of excited because it was like a media buying, you have like fast feedback loops, and like everything you try, you get really fast results. So it's exciting. And yeah, from there, I kind of just got engrossed into everything I was doing. And so more industry agnostic, but I guess just generally about the process, like I got excited, and I always want to build something good. So I don't think it really matters what it is. Like if someone said, make a better vacuum than Dyson, like I'm not a civil engineer or mechanical engineer, but I could probably imagine myself getting fixated on that. And I think that's kind of the thread. It has to be interesting or appealing to me.
I'm curious. Actually, I do love Dysons. We bought one, then a second, then a third. It has this new laser thing on the bottom, a light that lights up the dust. So you think your floor is perfectly clean, and then you take this thing out and you're going, oh my God.
There's a documentary, or not a biography on him, autobiography. And your comment about building something good, he takes that to the absolute extreme. That's his only focus.
I can imagine. Those are some nice vacuums.
Yeah. Sorry, Andy.
No, I was going to say, Charlie, you had a line there that is interesting, selling with conviction. And while it may not sound revelatory, you said, well, this is often why kind of the founders are the best. And one of the challenges we always have is you have to move off of founder-led sales relatively quickly when you're scaling. So how do you, and you're a guy who has scaled some business. You have one now that's, getting pretty big. How do you assess whether that person you're getting ready to hire to do sales work can sell with conviction?
So this is my bias and my kind of approach philosophically to sales. And I know people have different strategies that also work well. I think of sales generally not as sales, but I need to be really knowledgeable about this topic and approach whoever I'm talking to as an expert and just try to help them solve their problem. And assuming I'm selling something because I chose to be involved with this company, that I should be able to be sincere about it. And equally importantly is I know what I'm talking about. I think increasingly with SaaS or tech services sales, like you're not necessarily selling, you're basically building a trusting relationship where you're being helpful. And so to me, the most important element is hiring a person who actually is an expert and knows what they're talking about. So this is an extreme example. I don't think like every product manager is going to be a great salesperson, but someone who, the archetype of product manager, someone who can think in terms of like understanding a technology product, asking about users, understanding the other person's business problems, being probing in that way. To me, that's much more valuable than just like sales process or like having read the Challenger sale or anything like that. Because I think a lot of those process-oriented, pipeline-oriented elements can be managed, but you can't easily teach someone to be curious or to know what they're talking about, especially when it comes to technology stuff. Because, for example, with ScrumLaunch, there's so many different technologies, so many different things to keep up on. And I don't think taking a quick course on how, web servers work is going to get clients confident that you know what you're talking about. So I think my assessment is like, do they have knowledge about what they're talking about first and foremost?
Somebody else that we've interviewed in the past had this concept of curiosity and discipline, which kind of feels to me like what you're saying, but you're calling it curiosity and the desire to build something good. But yeah, and that each of those things on their own are not sufficient. You can be very curious, but not be disciplined enough to actually get the thing done. Or you can be very disciplined, but not be like curious enough to like figure out, where, go really deep into the thing. But your concept of building something good, I'm actually really interested. Why is it so important to you to build really good things versus just building things fast?
That's a really great question. I think probably this isn't a great answer, but it seems just kind of like when people talk about internal motivation, when I see something great or beautiful that we've made, it just makes me feel good. So I think it just somehow inherently I'm motivated by that. Like here's an example. When Trello first came out, it was so simple and you could use it for so many things. And I was just so impressed by it. Or when I took my Peloton out of the box and I got it set up in 2 minutes because it has easy onboarding. And if you look back to like, you bought something from IKEA 10 years ago and you had all these parts, like I think there's something really amazing when there's just you have an experience with some product or service and you're like, wow, they did it right. And it's so hard to do that. I mean, like I think the common example people use a lot is like the Apple Store, how they sort of stripped out the frills and they have, the different ratio of employees to customers. But yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it's like the pinnacle of satisfaction when something is just like done really well. And sometimes as a business owner or manager, I prioritize that even above like short-term financials. And I'm not sure if that's right or wrong, but I would rather make something perfect, even at the expense of other variables. And I can't fully explain why, but
and one last piece, is this in your own judgment, or you have lots of clients, right? Like, or is it also through like what you hear from them in the feedback?
That's a great question. So I'll sort of tier it like this. I think it's a requirement that they're happy. Like, but then sometimes I'll even look at what they're happy with and say, like, I don't think this is right. Or not even right. I don't think this is good enough. Like, so clients, there's all sorts of different kinds. And, we could build something and maybe there's like something, maybe they're happy, but I look at their product on some Android device and like the font goes off the screen. They may not care about that, but I can't help but fixate on it. So I think there's two levels. I never would say that if a client's unhappy, but I think it's right, that's okay, because ultimately I'm in a client business, so that's not true. But Claire likes to say that I am holding myself to too high of a standard, and sometimes that can drive other people crazy. But so anyway, that was a long-winded answer of I think there's like two good enoughs.
Got it.
Charlie, you talked about, that wow feeling. One of the things we sometimes do, I've done it for years interviewing people, is ask them what gives them that yes feeling at work. That personal, like, yeah, where you just want to jump out of your skin, feeling so good. And, it can be different things for, I closed a deal, I built this, I got a raise, whatever it is. You're in a different position because you're the boss. You're a guy who builds stuff. You hire people. You deal with clients. What personally gives you that yes feeling where you kind of, you're glowing inside and out, just feeds your soul?
Oh, great question. So anything we've built, when it has a really successful or big client event or when people really use it, and I can see, like, so here's an example. For one product that we built, we would have these big giving days, and there would be tons of users, and I would look at the analytics, like whether it's Mixpanel or Google Analytics or whatever, and just see, wow, this got used a lot. People figured out how to use it. They used it well. It did what it was supposed to, and it worked. And then at the end of that, it's sort of like at the end of a sports game that you tried really hard and you won a really close game. You're like, damn, team, like we did it. We did something hard. And I think that's kind of, because building good software or products is hard. And when you see it really work and people use it, you're like, I think that's the wow glow feeling. You're like, hell yeah, we made something awesome.
You're a person who's deeply involved in kind of product, technology, building. We've asked this question once before to somebody like you. What don't we appreciate, understand, take for granted when it comes to how hard it is to build great products? Because Andy and I are neither product managers, builders, developers. And sometimes we might not have as much empathy or consideration for what our companies are dealing with as we should. What are we not aware of as investors sometimes that like we should be when it comes to building great products and how hard it is?
That's a really good question. Have you guys ever seen a video of a surgery and it looks kind of like construction and it's like really messy and like it's not what you imagine? You're like, wow, I can't believe they're snapping that person's bones. I think when software development is also, it's really messy. And no matter whether it's Google or a huge company or a startup, the process is kind of ugly and it requires a lot of communication and collaboration. And so there's nothing, I would say, like really tidy about it. And because of that, so I think a lot of people from the outside see a really nice product and they're like, oh, someone had a vision, because there's a lot of revisionist history about how things got built and how things got made. They're like, oh, well, you just, we hire 5 people and they have to be good. And then, we have a plan, in 3 months we have a product. And it's just so much more messy than that. And there's a lot of effort, I think energy spent trying to keep things organized when this is like inherently high entropy, or like just a process that wants to keep getting disorganized. So I think a lot of times you'll hear from non-product or engineering people like, oh, just, why don't you just build this? And it's like, okay, why don't you just build this? And so I think that it's really messy and hard. And then a lot of things that don't look hard externally are much more challenging like in actual implementation. So and the last thing that I think is really hard, and I guess you guys do deal with this, but differently, you're looking at really imperfect information and you're trying to decide, like, is this right? And you probably get lots of opinions of other people with tons of conviction. And you're like, how can you be so sure? This company is like a year old. Like, this is inherently unclear. Like, this is really hard. And so when it comes to like product development, I think you have like, there's a certain humbleness that you need, because you just don't know. Like, you can do tons of user interviews, you can look at data, but you can't say for sure. And I think there's a fear also that, people who are developing products, like, they might get it wrong. Like, Amazon's, I think, famous for building tons of stuff, and we only hear about the awesome stuff, not the stuff in the graveyard. So I think also just there's a parallel to what you're doing in product development. Like, you might have the best team with awesome people. They might get one product or feature wrong. That doesn't mean their judgment's bad. It just means this is like an imperfect science, I think.
Do you wish your clients understood this better? I'm recognizing that some of them may listen to this, but listen,
all of them.
We may look like your clients at times. So,
what we try to do is say this. Like, I can say for myself, when I build anything, I'm not sure. I know one thing, I'm going to be wrong. I don't know how yet. So the sooner I can figure out how I'm wrong, the faster I can fix it. And so when we work with someone, we generally try to suggest, like, okay, here's whatever your core, the core pain is, or the hypothesis. Like, let's try to get there as quickly as possible, because then you're going to see what you need to change. And this, to me, this all is so iterative. And most clients who've built stuff before are pretty good about this, but there's a lot of people out there, and we don't deal with this a ton, but people like look at Steve Jobs and they think like there's, wake up with a vision, and a product just materializes. One step that I do often for people who want to build something really big and fancy and are like describing it in flowery language is I say, like, why don't you download a prototyping software like Balsamic and take all these words in your brain and literally make the screens. This is like for a 5-year-old. And then inevitably they're like, wow, there were a lot of gaps in my logic. So I think there's like resolutions to it, but yeah, like people who start with complicated concepts, it's mostly they're reasonable, but some people who have too much of a God delusion can be a bit of a challenge.
Hey, Charlie, can I push you a little bit on this? Because, Will's opened up a really interesting window to the fact that I think most of the world has no clue how software is built. We just know, hey, we hired these guys who are developers. We said, wouldn't it be great if the thing could tell us X, Y, and Z? And then they go build it. You used an analogy of surgery. Regrettably, maybe it's a good thing, most of us have never watched surgery done. Can we push you a little bit to give us another analogy that maybe most of the world will understand? Building software is like blank.
Okay, good question. So here's the wrong metaphor. We can start with the negative. people imagine that building software is like building a house. A house has an architect, and the architect makes a blueprint, and then people lay brick, and the house is done. And it works, like, theoretically. Having software, or building software is not like building a house, because there's a few different, I'd say, main differences. One, it's usually never done. So if someone says, hey, I want to build something like Airbnb for X, how much is it going to cost? And it's like, well, Airbnb probably spent over $1 billion on development by now. So would you like me to say it's $1 billion? like, what do you mean? So I think it's continuous. But in terms of your question about another metaphor for surgery, in terms of like the messiness, maybe it's kind of like, not everyone has a kid, but maybe it's kind of like raising a child. So you have a kid, and then other people who don't have a kid are like, your kid's crying, and they're like, oh, why don't you make your kid stop crying? It's like, okay, well, can you let me know how to do that? I'd love to. Or like, how do you, like, oh, he wants chocolate. Why don't you just tell him no? It's like, sure, great idea. Let me know how. And so this is an imperfect metaphor, but like, your kid is evolving always, and you have to try different methods. And then there's like other people, family, who are helping you, and they have different dynamics between one another. So software and people developing it are like a living organism. And there's actually a lot of parts of this that apply, I think. So if I have a child, I need to get my thoughts into their brain. Maybe some of the ways that I communicate in words don't resonate. Same with a product manager talking to a development team. Like, ultimately, the other people need to understand what you're saying. How do you make sure that's true? And then if I tell my kid something, and I say, hey, do this, and I think let's say, for example, I said, hey, rake the leaves. And he's like, okay, cool. And I say, be done when I come back. And then I come home, and he raked the side lawn, not the front lawn or the back lawn. And I'm like, why didn't you rake it all? I said, oh, you didn't tell me to. Stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, why do I need to be so explicit? So there are a lot of dynamic parts of interpersonal communication, and also just kind of like the messiness of developing a coherent understanding across people and evolving organisms. So maybe not perfect, but I think
I love it. I've never thought of it this way. And then I started to think about, like, then the kid just gets a bug, and you're like, you can't explain it, just all of a sudden has a bug, and you have to deal with it.
Yep. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, well, and then you go to Dr. A, and he's like, he's fine. Dr. B takes some Motrin. Dr. C, like, he has a skin-eating bacteria. This is actually how it works with coding. You're like, okay, what should we do? And you're the boss. You're the parent. You're like, okay, should we listen? Which person should we listen to? Or like, kid had a babysitter, and they had a bump on their head when you get home. The babysitter's like, oh, he ran into the table. The kid's like, the babysitter wasn't watching me, and I blah, blah, blah. Who's right? I don't know. These are like the weird dynamics you have to navigate. And so there's a lot of stakeholders. So actually, I guess it's more similar than I thought.
Well, Charlie, you're making me think a lot. I won't speak for a lot of us. I'll speak for myself. I think of, building software more like math. It's like a science, X plus Y equals whatever. What you just described feels much more like art. Like, we'll chip a little here. That looks, no, chip a little bit more. Maybe we're sculpting this thing. And maybe the difference is usually you finish with a piece of sculpture, but this you just keep refining. Is it closer to art?
I think so. And I'll give two metaphors why I think that. So the first one is, so let's say, because all of this is uncertain, and when you're building a product, like, let's say you're building a product over 3 years, the world's changing, everything's changing. There's so much dynamism. So first someone will say to you, hey, Charlie, can you build a bicycle? And you're like, okay, yeah, I guess we can do that. And then they're like, actually, the bicycle needs to be able to go on sand. Okay, I guess we need to change the tires and the suspension. All right, now the bicycle needs to be able to fly, but to be able to fly from a runway of sand. Okay, sounds good. All right, fair enough. now the bicycle needs to be able to also cook you dinner. So if someone said, hey, can you build an airplane that has a small galley for food? At the beginning, you'd end up with that. But you're kind of taking this winding road to this like multifunctional vessel. And it's really tricky to do that elegantly. And people talk about the concept of tech debt or like balancing these things. And so you just, it's hard, it takes foresight and also just kind of like the ability to figure out how to piece together things that maybe weren't originally envisioned. And I think to that end, it is like art, because it's not like a math problem. You start and you have a destination. With this, the destination's moving, but you have to use the craft that you've already built usually to figure out how to get there. And then I think the second thing, a sports metaphor about the process is, so I'm a soccer fan. Argentina won the World Cup. Argentina has Lionel Messi. He's the best player. They also had a lot of other young players, and their coach figured out how to make maybe not the best set of 11 players, all talent-wise, though they were good, win and beat like a French team that arguably has better players. So I think there's that art, if you will, of like how to make a set of people gel together. There's so much talk about like, this person's a rock star, this person's not a rock star. But I think that can lose sight of the fact that there's a team, and the team needs to be the best, not the rock star. So I think in those two ways, to me, it is more like art, because those are not scientific processes.
I'd love to kind of dovetail this and like your clients with learning more about your business today, ScrumLaunch. I know you told us a bit about what it was at the outset. Can you just give us a little bit more detail on, maybe starting with like, I remember years ago you said, I think I'm going to start, I don't know if I have this verbatim, but like, I think I'm going to start kind of a development agency, but I'm going to try to recruit talent from Eastern Europe. And I mean, fast forward however many years, it's like you're running a global organization and you have a lot of people that count on you. Like, tell us about the business. How did this all happen?
Great question. Okay, so I had a previous company called Life Mobile that was an ad tech company. And that company got acquired in 2015 by this company called Rhythm One, this publicly traded company in the UK, and they were doing a roll-up. So they bought like 4 or 5 ad tech companies, and these were private equity management, a private equity management team. So they thought more about the financials than, let's say, the synergies between the products. So my exciting role was, hey, we bought these 5 companies. You can be the product manager and like figure out how to smash them together. Oh, by the way, we have a team of outsourced developers in Ukraine to work with. So like have fun, and like, can it be done in 2 weeks? Yeah, of course it can. But so anyway, that's how it started. So I was working at this company, Rhythm One, and then Dima, who's my co-founder of ScrumLaunch, he was based in Kiev at the time. So he flew to LA for us to kind of strategize how to put these products together. So we started working together and became friends. And then we ended up starting a sports video technology platform together called VLoop. And we needed some developers for that. He's from a city in Ukraine called Kharkiv. So we flew to Kharkiv, set up a small office. I was surprised by how many cigarettes people were smoking at the office, but that's a topic for another day. So we set that up, and we had our company and our team. And so we worked on that for about 2 years and had a bunch of clients, but that ended up being a really challenging market. So we sold the IP for that company, but we still had this team in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Dima's wife got a visa from her job to move down the street from me in LA. So they moved to LA. And so ScrumLaunch, in a sense, started because I was trying to hire developers for my own needs. And then I had some friends initially who were like, hey, I had this really bad experience with this development team. And so started kind of organically with just providing teams to my friends and thinking to myself, wow, I never want anyone to have a bad experience with this again, because I'm basically the client. So I know what's really frustrating. And so from there, it kind of grew organically to what it is now in Eastern Europe and Latin America. Yeah, that's kind of the backstory. And there's obviously a lot more in there about like growing pains, problems with scaling. How do you make sure you have quality control at scale, cash flow, blah, blah, blah. But
when you met Dima and some of the talent in Ukraine, was that a kind of pivotal moment that opened your eyes to, hey, these are as quality of engineers and talent as I've seen anywhere? Like,
yes, it was really eye-opening because I was cynical before that. Because before that, when I was doing Life Mobile, there was a period of time where I worked with like some developers in another region, and I just had a really bad experience. And so I was just like, oh, I don't know if this can work. Like, there's too much context loss. But then when I met them and we started working together really well, it was definitely eye-opening. And granted, remote anything isn't hard. And when you do it across cultures, there's other dynamics that like you have to work hard to resolve. But going back to like my Argentina soccer metaphor, I believe that you can have a team and build the right dynamics. And I guess I wouldn't say I necessarily believed that before I, met Dima, went to Ukraine, et cetera.
One thing we wrestle with all the time is seeing great, motivational, inspirational founders who are non-technical, and they're building a software company, and they're sole founders.
Yeah.
And, the conventional wisdom is, make sure you've got a technical co-founder, et cetera. I mean, what's your experience been? And I know to some extent you feast off companies that need kind of a hired technical co-founder, to be euphemistic there. But like, if you were advising a group of entrepreneurs who say, hey, we're non-technical people, we're building software companies, do you tell them before you start, find yourself a technical co-founder? Or do you say, go for it, but here are the 3 things you need to do? What's the guidance there?
That's a really good question. So I'll say this. So there's great engineering talent like everywhere in the world. So it's certainly not bad to have a technical co-founder, a person who you trust, and then that team can be expanded on whether in the US or elsewhere. But let's say you don't. I think when it comes to a tech team, wherever the people are, biggest breakdown I see, if you find, let me just caveat this by saying whether they're a hired gun or internal, like you should trust them and like have done some vetting to make sure that like, okay, you think they're competent, because there's a lot of incompetent people. And so assuming we can solve for competence generally, the biggest breakdown I see is not like,
but Charlie, I got to jump in there, because one of the big challenges is the assumption you just make, assuming we can, solve for making sure they're competent. What do you say to that person who's sitting there founding a company who's going, look, I can use the word Python in a sentence, but once I'm past that, I don't know Python from C++. And I'm hiring people now who are going to be developing, programming, etc. How do I determine who's competent? Is it, should I just hire some consultant to be by my side to then hire? That's the thing we're struggling with. How do you move from, I've identified a pain point, I'm going to build a company that does this thing, but I'm not technical?
Yeah. Okay. Great. Good question. So this is not a scientific answer, but I think, and maybe this doesn't apply to everyone, in many of our professional networks, there are people we trust. And I think a trusted referral, like to someone technical, is the most efficient way to do this. If you trust someone and they've worked with technologists before, whether they're giving you an advisor or someone or some person or company to talk to, I think that trust networks, I would always approach this through people I trust. I would be really nervous to just go online and find someone randomly. So for me, it's a network of trust and relationships. And I think generally that will guide you in the right direction. Now, if you're 22 and you have no friends who work in technology or don't know anything, like that's tough. That's more challenging. I don't have a great answer. I guess if you're that guy and someone who's going to invest in you, hopefully they have people within their network. But I think this is kind of I'll say a network driven, the way I would approach that. And second, let's say you achieved that. Even if you achieve that, the biggest breakdown here is the lack of skill explaining product requirements. And so some founders can do this really well. I'll give a particular shout out to Matt at Gipper. He was young, but he basically turned himself into a product manager. And so he can explain really clearly and thoroughly in a way that development teams understand. Other founders who think like, I just say things in plain English to my development team and expect them to get done, that's a disaster. So I think if someone were going to hire a pivotal role, not to say that having a great CTO isn't awesome, but the product management, requirements writing, clarity of what needs to be built, effectively who's writing the blueprint for the first version, if that's written poorly, even having 10 Michael Jordans isn't going to build the right thing. So I think if you're a non-technical founder, don't sleep on this domain of being able to articulate clearly and coherently the product requirements, whether that's you or someone who's experienced in doing that. That's where the breakdown occurs most often.
I think we have a ton of questions. We don't have a ton of time. One thing I really want to cover is going back to Ukraine, right? You got into building a development firm with talent all across the world. You happen to have a lot of talent in Ukraine. The war broke out and all of a sudden you had to be like doing another job. Can you talk to us about like how you responded? Because I know the ins and outs of how you responded, but it was a really impressive effort. Can you just tell our listeners a bit about like, maybe this goes back to problem solving and being curious and trying to build something good or make something good out of it? Like, what happened?
So that was super crazy. And just to caveat, I would say the people on our team in Ukraine really did the most impressive stuff. I was kind of just like observing in awe to some extent. But so before February 24th, there was a lot of apprehension that this could really happen. I mean, it just seemed like so surreal. But I think I always, as a founder, try to just think about what's the worst thing that can happen and how can we be prepared for it. So before the war, we had, people, a lot of people in Kharkiv. And so we tried to figure out client by client, okay, what is the contingency plan? Now, for some clients, they wanted to relocate people just because of the risk. So we collaborated with them on that, and we literally were able to move people to other countries before the war. So that was the most straightforward. Then, however, other clients just kind of wanted to take a more sort of let's see what happens approach because people didn't really believe this could happen. I guess that's a history lesson for us. Anything can happen. But so the war started, and then we had a ton of people in Kharkiv. And for the first week, it was just blackouts, electricity outages, clients panicking, and people on our team just not knowing where everyone was. Is everyone safe? And I also want to give a shout out to 95% of our clients because and I think this is a testament to everyone. They built teams together. So the people in Ukraine who were on their team were a part of their team, and that's how it should be. So they were really empathetic and compassionate. Obviously, they still needed, their business to move forward too. But there was a week or two there where we collectively were helping relocate people to Western Ukraine. We bought a bunch of those Starlink satellite internet devices, some diesel diesel generators. I mean, there's a lot of things you think about after a war starts where you're like, okay, I never imagined there'd be blackouts, like electricity outages, like your phone can't, like let's say even you're using mobile internet from your phone to power your computer. Well, if your phone runs out of battery, then what are you going to do? So there were a lot of like supplies and relocation efforts and just kind of communication across lots of people that needed to happen really fast. So I shouldn't really take too much credit, but I'm like incredibly thankful for our clients and also impressed that the people on our team in Ukraine, like some of them were like working in like a bunker. And it's not like we like said you should work in a bunker. It was just like, you know, again, they had a good relationship. They cared about what they were doing. And it's just, it's crazy when you're sitting in, you know, New York or the West Coast, and you're on a call, you're on a stand-up call, and the other person is in a bunker. It's just like, what the fuck is going on here? Sorry to swear on your podcast, but it's insane, but it's really humbling because you're like, I guess we should be thankful that we're working on cool stuff with smart people and like everything's okay. And I think as a founder, going back to the loser concept, you can spend about half of your time like, wow, I suck, our product sucks, I'm a massive loser. But then when other people on your team are like in a war, you're like, okay, I guess I was overreacting to all of those things. Like this is really bad. It's
well, and also what I'm hearing coming through is like the way that, you know, as a founder, you could feel like a loser, but all of a sudden your teams did this thing, stepped up.
Yeah.
Way that you could have expected.
Yeah. You just feel proud of them and you feel like, and you also feel responsible for them too. Like there's like a, and also it is not perspective that anyone asked for, but it's like sort of a punch in the face. You're like, oh, wow. I mean, the Israel-Gaza thing, it's like same story. Like I'm sitting here and my kids are safe and I'm worried about, you know, the font. I'm like, that's Garamond. I really need it to be Helvetica. It's like, okay, I've lost my mind in complete perspective. And some of these things are just like a reminder. We're building things here that like that's a privilege, I guess, not like it's not life or death.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is for some other folks.
Yeah.
Bill, you want to throw the last question?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably do another one of these because there's a lot more we'd love to learn, but just in the
4 hours more of questions.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, we do have a question we'd like to ask at the end. Other than family, because the obvious first thought is family, is there any person in particular you'd like to thank and why?
Just in my life or?
Yeah, in your life.
Does my wife count as my family?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry to be.
At least at this point.
Okay. So I guess at the end for this, I think I'll thank Dima because Dima is Dima's the best. I don't know if you guys have met Dima, and he's different than me, and he
He's your partner.
Without him, yeah, my partner at ScrumLaunch, and he's one of my best friends, very good friend, and he's great at putting up with me being absolutely psychotic sometimes. Like I think he can handle probably parts of me that should improve when working together, and so I think I'm thankful for his patience and also just like, you know, like I said, you know, it's easy to feel bad when you're building a business, but then if you step back and then you realize like, okay, you know, we did a pretty good job overall. And it also builds a relationship with people that like, it's like kind of like being on a sports team. You did something hard together and that's really meaningful. So I think we've been through a lot of life together. So I think I would give a thanks to Dima, gratitude, I would say as well.
Well, awesome. I look forward to meeting Dima sometime soon.
He's an ultimate character. You guys will really enjoy meeting Dima.
Charlie, this has been great. There are a lot of wisdom and gems in here as I've been taking notes, and I'll look forward to going back and listening to this and pulling more out. But thank you so much. Thanks again for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed this interview with Charlie. If so, I encourage you to visit our website to find many others just like it. We'll be back soon with another interview. In the meantime, keep doing all the great work that you're doing to improve our world.